Hello and welcome to OT the podcast. We're here to talk about watches, time, Felix's punctuality, and what we can do to fix it. My name's Felix Schultz.
Always on time. My name's Andy Green. How are you, Felix?
10 minutes late, as usual.
Did you take some sort of obscure Cessna to get here?
I got my my Beechcraft CPUP 180. Oh God, today's guest's not going to like that intro.
He's shaking his head. Today's guest probably did. Cole Pennington from the one, the only Hodinkee.
Yeah, what a guy. The man, the myth, the very knowledgeable about watches, planes, and everything in between.
Legend to some. Pejeros as well. Yeah, we thought we were calling Cole from Thailand at about, I think, mid-morning.
It was a very reasonable, civilized time for us when we're normally calling people on the other side of the planet. Thailand's like, 4 hours behind us? Something like that?
Yeah, not that far behind. Not that far behind Melbourne. Turns out we were talking to him at 2 a.m. in New Jersey from a hotel room.
And he didn't tell us.
He didn't tell us.
Yeah, it was...
He's a class act. That's Cole Pennington for you, though.
We felt pretty bad.
We felt bad. He felt bad. We all came together and we felt good. So, yeah, can't wait for that.
Well, you don't have to wait very long, Andy. But do you know what else we've been up to? You do know what else we've been up to because I sent you the text messages as we were doing it.
What have we been up to?
We've created a community platform, Andy Green.
Whoa.
A community platform for lovers of OT the podcast, aficionados of Andy Green, and haters of myself to come together and to talk about their mutual interests, which surprisingly extend beyond watches.
Yes. So where do we find this community discussion, Felix?
Well, it's on the streets. It's a whisper in the wind, some might say. Actually, no, we have chosen the platform of Discord just to keep people guessing. You might have expected a Facebook group, even a Slack channel, maybe a Clubhouse.
Oh.
We've gone with the other option, which is Discord. I don't know how to describe it. It's a wonderful combination of Slack and Clubhouse meets hardcore gamers. But we don't really talk about, Call of Duty so much. It's more about Call from the AD.
No, it's good fun. It's good fun. So we have a link in our Instagram bio to join. Otherwise, we'll put links in the show notes for the next handful of episodes. But yeah, it's a cool place where we can kind of talk to you all, talk to all the listeners and engage a little bit. I don't know about you, Felix, but I find Instagram and the DMs get a little bit overwhelming at times,
Sure,
and this is somewhere we can kind of jump in and just have more focused
discussions. It's a bit more personal, and I think we haven't really sort of fleshed out what we're going to do with it. We might do like some voice stuff. I reckon if we do like watch matchmaker stuff, it'll probably live there a bit more in the future. Maybe like, of course we'll still accept emails and DMs, but it's like, hey, join the Discord. Let's have a chat about it.
Yeah.
That's cool. You can have there's different channels, so we can post all the
competitions in there as well. Maybe
competitions like give away a Volkswagen or something.
Yeah, maybe. Well,
you've got a Volkswagen, excessive, don't you? Do you want to put it up for?
Let's see.
Hey, anyway. So Discord, get on it. We'll put links up. What else have you been up to, Andy?
Well, I've just gotten back from a trip down Gertrude Street in Melbourne. Got a
sunny Collingwood.
Sunny, Fitzroy, I think technically. Got a haircut at Pickings and Parry.
Fun fact, I can actually tell you this. One side of, it's Smith Street, one side is Fitzroy, and one side is Gertrude Street. So it depends where on Smith Street, on Gertrude you were, if you were in Collingwood or Fitzroy.
Closer to Brunswick Street, Felix. Fun fact though. Pickings and Parry, I know you know the guys down there.
It's been a minute.
For a haircut. Hopped over the street to Lalabo for some fragrance. Urban Loop, my newest favourite store in Melbourne. Lots of
is that where
do
they sell watchmakers loops for industrial settings?
No, heaps and heaps of really cool denim and workwear. Some Korean brands, some South Korean brands that they sell. Some American denim brands. So it's a nice afternoon for me.
Did you buy anything nice?
The other week, I got a few things from Lalabo actually, but I did get a really cool shirt from a Western, really nice denim shirt from Urban Loop from a brand called Free Note. A couple of weeks ago now, it's got turquoise.
I saw that.
Buttons, really nicely decorated. Yeah, really nice stitching, very high quality. If anyone listening likes their denim, check out Free Note as well. It's a really cool USA brand.
Cool. How's your haircut? High and tight?
Sharp. Yeah, it's actually a very tight cut. Strong fade. No, I'm happy.
Nice. What else has been happening in anything watch related? I mean, I know we've covered off your
Yeah.
hair, your odor, and your
Land,
apparel.
hair, and sea.
Wow.
What have I been seeing? Well, actually, had a little visit from Bell and Ross earlier in the week for the launch of their new BR0392 Red Radar Ceramic,
Oh, nice. Is this the
which,
one that's
yeah,
limited to 999 pieces?
it's like you've got the press release in front of you. It's one of the cooler Bell and Rosses, I got to say. These radar pieces that they've done, probably 4 or 5 different versions of now. I think there's the green. There's definitely been a red before. This is matte black ceramic. In their 42 millimeter case, I believe
Nice. Yeah,
that's
good
the
size.
O3. Just on a Velcro sort of fabric strap, which you might have seen on some of the other Bell and Ross. 4,300 US. I think it's pretty cool, pretty funky watch. But the radar design, it's hard to describe. You just got to Google Bell and Ross Red Radar, and you'll go, yeah, that's cool.
Well, I mean, my description of it would be there's like instead of hands, there's sort of two discs. So there's one
Yeah,
disc for hours and one disc for minutes. Do you know what I'm
kind of like a
waiting for?
radar screen.
Yeah, it's a really clever and on brand.
Not gimmicky at all.
Yeah. Do you know what I'm waiting for from the radar collection?
What's that?
The rainbow radar.
Might happen. That'd be cool. All right, Felix, what are we doing now?
Look, I know this is, not really approved sales practice or interview techniques, but I think we need to do a bit of cold calling. Let's
That's
get
it's,
Cole on the line.
let's do it.
Our guest today is Cole Pennington, who most of you will know from the editorial team that is the juggernaut of Hodinkee. But before he joined the Mighty Dink, he's had a long career in journalism from work in Thailand, elsewhere in Southeast Asia, India. We've found him now in the States, where he's en route to one of the most Cole Pennington things I can imagine, a showing of World War II era military planes. We're probably going to talk about that a little bit, but we should talk about watches too. Cole, what's been going on?
Oof, where do I start? Well, I just got back to the
Mm-hmm.
States. First, I'll start by saying I'm happy to be here talking to you guys.
Good to have you.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. And I guess we should note that we've been trying to do this, but I have been just, it's my scheduling has been crazy. But what's been going on? Yeah, just got back to the States from a long stint in Thailand working on an interesting watch project. Kind of looking at a culture or country through the lens of watches and discovering people, their collections, collecting habits that are tied to the culture, limited editions in the market, and so forth. So, yeah, I've been in Thailand for the past 2.5 months doing that. Just got back. So,
Fantastic. This week, we are very pleased to have the wonderful NOMOS Glashütte as our sponsors. The German brand has released some colourful new campus models. Felix, what do you think of them?
You cannot go wrong with a club campus. They're an incredible way to get into Nomos, and these 4 new versions are no exception. Andy, we'll get to the dials in a minute, but first of all, let's see what makes these new club campus models special. The watches are made, as you might guess, with graduates in mind, but really any milestone from a new job to a birthday works just as well. They're powered by the manually wound manufacturer Caliber Alpha and come with a solid caseback and complimentary engraving for that special message.
Love that. Felix, what would you get engraved on yours to make it a gift that lasts a lifetime?
No doubts, I would get Andy and Felix BFF since 2014.
Love it.
Yeah, so the club campus, it also represents an entry point into Nomos. The prices on these watches start at a very fair 1,870 Australian dollars or 1,100 euro for our international friends, and that's for the 36 millimeter model. There's a reason we always recommend these watches in our watch matchmaking. It's because they're hard to beat. Now, Andy, talk to me about the dials.
Hard to beat and hard to miss, aren't they? There are 2 new dials, Absolute Grey and Future Orange. And let me just say, if this orange dial is anything to go by, the future looks bright. But seriously, these 2 dials have been inspired by the current mood. The grey represents all that homeschooling so many people around the world have been dealing with, and I reckon those Zoom calls and all that working from home. Whilst the orange is all about a brighter beginning, the future, and something that we can really get behind.
Fun fact, Andy, grey is one of the Pantone colours for 2021, so NOMOS is on trend.
You know it. And what I really love about these dials is those details. The blue luminous numerals on the grey dial are lined up with some orange for a really nice extra bit of pop. And the Future Orange has some subtle grey, greeny minute numerals on the outer track. It's really all about the details here.
Now, Andy, you've been wearing about the 38mm absolute grey dial around. How have you found it?
Pretty great, to be honest. The size is a real sweet spot for me. I've got smaller watches and I've got large watches, but I've never really worn a 38mm case for this long. I found it super versatile. The 20mm anthracite velour leather strap matches with pretty much anything. Although if you did want to go a little bit sportier, it is rated to 100 meters water resistance after all. There is bracelet options available. I love the little orange details, and I've got to say, I was really into the slender 8.5mm profile. How did you go with yours, Felix?
Yeah, so mine did not fly under the radar at all. And that is what I absolutely loved about it. The 36mm size is totally wearable, thanks in part to the longer lugs on the club. And it punches well above its size, thanks to that incredible orange dial. It really is a mood lifter. It will be a bold call as a daily wearer, but these days, why not? I would 100% do it.
Yeah, so would I. Felix, who's this for?
Well, a few people could really get behind this. Graduates and, people celebrating milestones, as we've discussed, but also anyone who wants to try Nomos out. And I've got to say, someone's just looking for a top-notch, cheerful watch absolutely cannot go wrong with a club campus.
Completely agree. So to recap, there are 4 new models: Absolute Grey in both 36 and 38mm, and Future Orange in 36 and 38mm. Prices start from 1,870 Australian dollars for the 36mm model and 2,060 Australian dollars for the 38mm model.
Find out more at nomos-glashütte.com. That's nomos-glashütte.com. You can also buy it from that site, as well as online retailers like Mr. Porter. If you wanted to check it out in person, pop into your local Australian authorised dealer, such as the Hourglass or Monards.
Alrighty, time to get back to the show. Wow, you've been busy, and we're really interested to hear about sort of the watch collecting scene in Thailand, as we sort of saw from your Instagram stories. It seems to be famous for Seikos, but how do the tastes differ to sort of the States or wherever else you've been in the world and sort of observed some trends?
Well, it's a great question, and I think so. Japan is known for kind of otaku, like the nerding out on something or going deep on something. Thailand isn't particularly known for that, but it very much has that same exact element. So people will choose a reference or a brand and they will just go deep on it, and it becomes what they collect and what they do. So one of the projects we were working on, there's a guy who actually owns 3,000 Omegas. So he opened a museum inside of his own office called an Omega Passion Museum.
Is this a guy with the braces?
No, he doesn't have braces actually. Okay. But maybe at some point he did. I mean, his teeth are really nice.
No, I mean, like holding up your pants braces. There's a guy, he has like he has braces to hold his pants up, but they're like also carrying like 20 Omegas.
Suspenders, Felix.
Yeah, suspenders. Sorry.
Okay. Of course. No, I don't think he may be. I mean, put it this way: when it comes to Omegas in Thailand, there are a number of people, but this is the guy. This is the guy. And this is a good example of just collecting culture over there, because for every brand or even every reference, there is the guy, which is different than anywhere I've been before. Actually, I think it's an important distinction. In the States, I think we're very focused on trends. In Thailand, there is the blue chip trend, which is universal. People collect blue chip watches, right? But then there's just a deeper or stronger appreciation for certain brands and watches that we don't really look at over here. Like, for instance, the Omega one. And then, I did a whole big project on trying to answer one simple question. And I'm sure you guys have asked yourself this question too. Why does Thailand have all these limited edition Seikos? You know that they do, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, they have so many, and no one else does. No country. Yes, there are plenty of JDM models. There's US exclusives, but it hasn't been going on for the past 15 years like it has in Thailand. So kind of explore
What's
that.
the answer? Can you tell us?
In short, the answer is a very good relationship with headquarters in Japan to push through ideas and designs, in conjunction with a relationship that's been. It's a very important market to Seiko in Asia, actually. In fact, the most important market behind Japan.
Yeah, I believe that.
So
they've got manufacturing there too, right? In Thailand.
They are. The 7S26 movement had been made in Thailand. Right now, and that's one thing, I couldn't get a clear answer, and I think that's by design,
Yep.
on what exactly is made there. But in the past, we've seen a lot is actually made in Malaysia. So that's, the one neighboring country to the south. And some things have been made in Thailand historically. Could not get a clear answer on what's being made there now. However, there are still a ton of limited editions for Thailand right now.
All those Zimby watches that people go nuts for. Is it Zimby? I don't know if I'm saying that right. No.
It is. It's Zimbe, but for some reason they pronounce it Jinbei with a J.
Okay.
Almost like, yeah. So that's, I don't know if this is correct, so don't totally quote me on it, but I think it's the Japanese word for whale shark. It has something to do with the whale shark,
Yeah.
which is the driving force behind all the Zimby models. And I think they're up in the mid-teens on how many models have been released now under Zimby.
And it's fascinating, and maybe just to sort of stick with this a while, it's actually a question I asked the Australian Seiko people when I saw them a little while ago. Why Thailand? Do you think that sort of regional model that the local market limited editions and those special releases is something that the brand Seiko is now rolling out to different markets? Like they're using it maybe not on purpose, but it was like a case study.
Great question. I think from the research I've done and talking to people who know, that Thailand's unique position has ruffled feathers in other parts of the world. People are like, okay, well, why Thailand?
Yeah.
So, I mean, think about how many, I can't think of a single Seiko that only is sold in Australia. Seiko, Core Seiko, not Grand Seiko, which, we have the US exclusive.
Yeah,
There's
sure.
the JDM.
Yep.
But Core Seiko, there's not. To my knowledge, there isn't anyone.
I mean, there's a few limited editions that we get in a green and gold colorway, as they're our proud national colors, but no, there's no sort of highly visible limited editions just for our market. I think Thailand's still pretty special in that regard.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's being rolled out or even tested anywhere else still to this day. So I hope it does become a thing, right? That would make the collecting aspect far more interesting.
Yeah, fantastic. It's a fascinating brand. Did you pick anything up, Seiko or otherwise, while you were over in Thailand?
I actually did. So all right, well, here's another thing. I'm writing a story now about it. I kind of had an encounter with, and I know you guys were around in this time, but the era of the yellow monster. You remember these days on the forums, right?
I've got thoughts.
So I have been loving the yellow monster from afar since, the mid 2000s, when it was like the forum darling.
Yeah, sure.
Then finally I came face to face with one in the wild in a market, a JJ market for people who know Bangkok. And it was offered for sale and everything. And finally, like, oh, you have it right in front of you for sale. And I was like, you know what? Couldn't bring myself to even think about buying it. The prices are crazy now, of course, but came close. I mean, that was crazy to be offered a yellow monster in the wild, per se.
Yep.
I saw one edition. In addition to that one, I saw one at the headquarters, but that's not in the wild, right? This was totally in the wild. So didn't pick that up. But what I ended up picking up was a pair of Seiko 5 mod watches.
Cool.
And they're modified with the Thai characters for numbers on the dial.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, so that's just a little souvenir.
Now, where are you on the monster? Because I think I've said it before. That was actually the first watch mechanical watch I ever bought, and it was a black monster, around that sort of, peak time zone time of, 2008 or whatever it was. Took me a while to work out that I actually hated the watch. Where do you're pro monster? Am I right in that one?
I am, to be honest. Yeah, I can't say I hate it. No, not at all. In fact, I'll defend it.
Okay, well, you sell it to me as let's pretend that I'm the guy, the head of Seiko. You're the designer of this watch. You have to get this ugly scalloped bezel, too thick bracelet, weird geometry watch over the line. I'm sorry, Seiko, I love you, but sell the Seiko monster to me, Cole. This is a challenge for you.
Okay, let's think here. Well, I would actually look at it. So you're looking at it from a pre-production point of view.
Yep.
But instead of that, let's look at it from a post-production point of view and revel in the notion that so many people had adopted it as the best watch to get into watches, right? There has to be a reason why. And you have a strong argument. The bezel is kind of weird. I'll stand up for the bracelet though. The bracelet was one of the best early bracelets I found, but I ended up putting it on a Watchadoo. You remember those?
Sure. Yep.
Which I think Watchadoo is actually Australian.
Could be. I don't know if they're still around.
I don't know either,
Yeah,
but I
I've
remember
still
we
got
would
one
buy
going
them off
strong.
eBay.
It's an outstanding strap, but lasted a lot longer than the watch.
I don't know. I think people say this about a lot of watches. It's a love it or hate it thing, but it actually is. That one is a love it or hate it thing. And here's the thing. It's still the first mechanical watch you bought, right?
Yeah.
So that's undeniable.
It did its job.
So exactly, it did its job. So looks wise, yeah, I guess it has to be. It's for some people, it's not for others, but it occupied a very unique position in how horology became popularized among, I don't know, dudes who had access to the internet, you know?
Cole, you're very famous for sort of going deep on your research, and as you kind of mentioned, traveling to Thailand to kind of talk about Megas and Seikos, and you put the work in. And what we want to talk to you about is your work. And one article you recently wrote a few weeks ago now was on Korono Tokyo's sort of latest release, and really interesting take on their order window and how it sort of, there was a X to Y period of when you could open it, get an order in, and sort of, I guess it was designed to help with resale premiums and flippers. With your take in mind, what do you think about flippers in the grey market in general?
All right. So we just kind of ended, or we're just talking about the early days. Flipping wasn't really a thing back then. So I think, all right, my take on this is, depending on when you got into watches, that also helps inform or establishes how comfortable or how normal the flipping culture is. I mean, for kids who are, I say kids,
It's a good answer.
They're not kids anymore, but there is a crop of people who grew up with kind of the supreme streetwear, hype culture, all this stuff. Where there, flipping is it's a normal thing, right? It's just whatever, that's the secondary market is the primary market, and you just grew up accepting that. For me, I kind of fell in love with watches in an era when you could go to an AD and buy a Rolex, a Patek, whatever you want, granted, you slap down the card, but now I think the part that bothers me about gray market flippers and so forth is you're actually not but market forces are taking away the opportunity from people to have access to these goods. And yes, this is a byproduct of the free market, and I am a American capitalist. So does that stand in, is that opposing view? Not really. I would say it's a shame that folks don't have access to the things that they once did. And it also sometimes, in my opinion, gives or kind of paints our hobby in a negative light when it becomes about profiteering to a degree. Yeah. So, yeah.
I think that's a really, really true point about, your degree of comfort when you came into the collecting spaces, that's really true. One sort of follow up there, I'd be interested to get your take on is you're not just someone that loves watches. You're also someone that's a highly visible writer and expert in the area. How do you deal with that? Because that's something I find really challenging is addressing the concept of flipping and the values of flipping in a professional capacity. Do you talk about the realities of this watch? Like, well, this is a new Rolex Submariner. You're not going to get it. Like, what, putting the retail price, all that sort of the reality of the situation versus the press release. Where do you walk that line?
Great question. Yeah. So, all right. Back a little while ago, I had Joe Thompson, who also everyone knows in the industry. He was essentially my editor, right?
Yep.
And he had a policy: don't turn in a piece unless you've addressed the elephant in the room, or at least never leave the reader hanging, saying, "Well, there's a glaring omission in this piece," right? So, I kind of am usually I tackle it head on, right? That's my approach, because that is the reality, and there's no sense in hiding it. Like, for instance, all right, yes, I work for Hodinkee. We don't sell Rolex anyway. We have nothing to do with the supply problem. So it's not like there's nothing to hide here, and it's not disrespectful to Rolex to say, hey, there's a situation out here that's leaving a lot of people unhappy. I think it is just the reality of it. So in a professional capacity, am I critical of these brands, thinking that they're manipulating supply and demand? No, not really. Like, when you put it this way, we've seen the pandemic change industries. Like, for instance, in America, there's a crazy bicycle shortage right now. In addition, a car
Yep.
shortage globally because of the chips and so forth. So I'm not going to say that they're artificially manipulating supply and demand or anything like that. Maybe it just is, right? So professionally, I think address it, get comfortable with talking about it, but don't, do these like trumped up conspiracies that all these things are happening. I think that's a little bit too outlandish of a theory for me personally.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's that's a great approach. And speaking of outlandish, we've just gotten our copies of Hodinkee Mag, which very very excited to get. Being back in lockdown here in Melbourne, the both of us, so it came at the right time. Immediately jumped to an article that you wrote called "Snuck into Space," which is it's a pretty big, solid piece from you, and it explores an astronaut named Jerry Carr, who I wasn't familiar with, and I am now, and his Movado. Before we get into sort of the specifics, can you just give us the top line here?
Top line is, there are two top lines, and one actually it builds off of Felix's work.
What?
Well, with the Pogue not being the only first watch in space, you've written about that.
Yeah. I'm not going to claim any credit for. I just rewrote what other people had written in other places.
Well,
but, I'll own
during
it.
my research, when I was researching, your name came up quite a bit
Hey.
in the early days of the first Pogue becoming a thing, right? So yeah, the top line is the Seiko Pogue was not the first or only automatic chronograph in space. It happened to be that Jerry Carr, Commander Carr, snuck a Movado up on his ankle on Skylab 4 as well. And so the El Primero was also the first automatic chronograph in space on the same mission.
That's wild. This is
It
like,
is.
how do you go about researching and writing up this story like this? Because this is one it's a bit more than just a press release. Like, this will actually have an impact on prices in the watch industry, and I'm sure Movado's got to make the watch in a few years' time, all that sort of stuff.
That would be interesting to see. So, well, I'll tell you. I mean, Seiko certainly hasn't made the Vogue again, but how do you go about it? So this one started by the breadcrumb fell into my lap. I got a message on Instagram, kind of like, there's something you should see, or something you should look into, and it was a friend of Jessica Carr, who is the daughter of Jerry Carr. So Jerry Carr passed away, left behind stuff. One of these things was a watch, and Jessica had the watch and was getting it serviced, and kind of told her friend, like, hey, can you help me navigate this watch world, and I want to get this watch serviced and so forth. And he shot me a message. So that, and his name's Michael Hammond. And yeah, that was how it started. And then, all right, from there, where do you go? Well, we already have access to Jessica. We have access to government or NASA databases. We have, everything. Skylab itself is pretty well documented. As you know, like, the space world is even more nutty than the watch world in terms of detail oriented, and it should be, right? This is
space.
These are scientists. It's space, yeah. So that's how that started, and I guess with something like this, I think there was a large emphasis on journalistic integrity, and it had to go through a lot of layers. So it wasn't just an editor editing it. It was a number of fact checkers and so forth who were triple checking with all the sources and so forth, because it's a big claim. And snuck into space, yeah, there is a certain framing there, and the reason it's framed that way is because in an oral interview, an oral history report that NASA did with Carr in 2000, he actually outlined this whole thing. So the crazy thing about this is this report sits on a .gov website, nasa.gov, an oral history report that he did in 2000, where he outlines the whole thing, how he, during the suit up period, put this Movado on his ankle and brought it up. However, that was 2000. It's 2021 now, right? And it only came out in 2021. So 20 years it was out there. It was just no one looked. No one saw it there. And there were some people, there's Moonwatch Universe, had spotted it and made a post, but there just wasn't quite enough. There was no corroboration or anything like that. And I think the missing piece finally was Jessica having the watch, and that was the last piece that we needed to go back and look for anything regarding the watch, because she probably typed in Movado, and I did too, right? I landed on the same exact oral history report. So that's how it all came together.
Now, there was some Facebook searching involved here, right? That sort of used the platform for good, not evil, that helped with the process.
That's right. Yeah. So there's a guy named Dr. Lee who is kind of doing the same thing, unbeknownst to anyone else who had also already made contact. So that was through Facebook. And Jessica also made some posts on Facebook about it too. And once it hits Moonwatch Universe and Spacewatch groups, obviously, it blows up. But the initial post was, "Hey, here's a watch. Does anyone know anything about it?" It was kind of like that.
Yeah, right. So I love, and I'm knowing you and knowing your sort of style of journalism. Imagine this was a very exciting piece for you to kind of dive into, and sort of as it unfolded, it would have been very exciting. And I have a question for you: if you could smuggle a watch into space on your ankle, what would it be?
It wouldn't be a Speedmaster, that's for sure. That's a great question. That's a difficult one. So this is one thing that I kind of came to doing all this research. The reason that watch is special is because I'll answer the question in a second. Sure. But the reason the watch is special is because it was one of the firsts, and it was one of the more interesting watches in a critical mission at a critical time. Like nowadays, any watch that goes into space, like in our lifetimes, we will see suborbital travel normalized for sure. Maybe even more than that, right? So the watch on your wrist can go to space. It's kind of whatever. It's just like the Amelia Earhart's watch is special, but the watch that you and I wear on an airplane to go from Australia to Basel or whatever is not special, right? So whatever watch I bring up right now is marginally special. It's not going to be a monumental occasion. I mean, it would be on a personal level, of course, if I went to space. But even if you look at, ISS watches now, of course, the Speedmaster dominates the conversation, but people still do bring up their own watches, of course. But all right, so I was just buying myself some time to choose the watch. The answer would be maybe I would sneak up my whole collection, which runs the gamut. But
I want to know how you're sneaking it up now. That's the how many ankles do you have?
So that nowadays there is the PPK kit that you can put stuff in. But I think so part of the research during the research phase for this story, something came to light that right after one of the Apollo missions, the government cracked down on astronauts bringing their personal effects up because it could lead to personal gain down the road, right? Sure. Which didn't look good. So I wonder now, and I don't know what the current rules are. I mean, I've done the talking watches with astronaut David Williams, gotten somewhere with that, and through Omega have talked to Nicole Stott and so forth. And I always kind of ask, like, all right, can you just bring up a watch or two or something? And the answer is that no, there's a pretty formal process, right? So you would have to sneak one up if you're not bringing it on your PPK. And I think you're probably allowed to, but how am I sneaking it up? The hell if I know. I don't even know how I'm getting to space.
Fair answers. So, I mean, you've just mentioned that you have chatted to your fair share of astronauts. And I think of you sort of as like Hodinkee's resident space guy. Maybe there's a few of you, but you're one of the...
Jack.
Yeah. Yeah, I just thought of Jack and maybe, James a bit as well. But
yeah, James.
You're in the space department at Hodinkee. What is it that draws you to this sort of watch?
The short answer is the story draws me to the watch itself. But I guess the larger answer would be, one thing I'm into is, so you're right. Like there are folks that colleagues, everyone's good at something. One thing I'm not that good at is market trends and watches as investments and all that stuff. So like, I better be good at something else because I'm not good at that, right? So might as well be the space thing or the aviation, whatever. So, but that's kind of a joke. But really, I would say watches being used is what I get off on. Like, I think that is the most interesting part of our hobby. Watches that were used in an interesting manner as tools. I know it's kind of trite, like, oh, watch is used as a tool, right? Like you sure people have said that a million times on this podcast too. However, adding to that conversation or adding to that lore or discovering something new is very exciting. And I think, like this Movado kind of illustrates, the stories are still out there. So even though it seems like there's nothing new under the sun, the motivating factor behind all this to me is that, yeah, there are quite a number of stories that have yet to be told. And if you have a natural inclination to, follow the story here, then you better take it.
I love that, and I think that's why you have so many fans of your work in particular, and obviously the Hodinkee team is fantastic, but your sort of storytelling approach and there's that genuine excitement that it's clear that you get from all of this.
No, thank you. Yeah, just trying to make the watch world a better place, as we all are. And you guys too. I mean,
Yeah.
you're no slouches over there.
And now, one thing I do want to ask, I mean, if you love the stories, is there a story that you're? I mean, maybe you're not going to answer this question because you don't want other people getting the jump on you. But is there something you would like to tell? Like, is there one that you've sort of been hunting, or that you wish you could find out more about?
Okay, yeah. So yes, there are some stories, and it's not something that anyone could get a jump on or anything. But I think something interesting. Before Hodinkee, I was actually, and this is crazy, but was on the way to flying helicopters in the military, which is kind of crazy. I
Sure.
know it sounds weird, but so as part of that process, I became acquainted with a number of folks in elite units within the aviation world.
Okay.
And this had nothing to do with watches at the time, but I did kind of uncover some stories, particularly like the watches that were worn during famous raids in the mid 2000s
Hmm.
in the Middle East and so forth. And like those are stories you can't talk about. But sitting across the table from someone saying, "Yeah, I wore this watch during this event," like that's pretty cool and pretty wild. So yeah, there are definitely stories like that I would love to write about, but out of respect for the nature of the work and so forth, you just can't, of course. Additionally, I think one thing that happens nowadays, and it's a good thing, I think this is probably a good thing, but when a watch lands with a collector, certain collectors, they want nothing to do with the people blowing up the story. They just enjoy it personally. Like there's a number of watches that I know about where they are who own them that are like very cool, like watches used in early sea exploration missions or
Sure.
programs. That oh my god, that would be such a great story to tell. But out of respect for the collector, you just can't. So yeah, there are a lot. Trying to think of some other ones.
No, I think they're
Yeah.
great, and you're absolutely correct about you've got to respect the author of not the author of the story, but the owner of the story, and you
Hmm.
And
can't
security
just
It's not your story,
clearance and
exactly. Yeah, all
NSA,
that
and
stuff too.
just if they're listening,
Yeah.
we'll miss you. Well, talking about collectors, talking about stories, one piece of content I really enjoyed watching recently was You're Talking Watches. Love them all, but this one was a little bit left of field with Greg Selch.
Yeah.
Before we get into the actual chat there, how did you pitch that? Because talking watches has become this sort of phenomenon where it's usually a very big collector or someone very high profile, and this was sort of the opposite, and it worked beautifully. How did you get that one over the line?
A few things. I mean, it's part of, well, the larger answer is that as Hodinkee changes and grows and so forth, we are trying new
Cool.
things. And it just happened in a time when new ideas are championed by the folks that normally in the past it would go through different layers, and we're actually trying something new, right? And this Greg, I have known Greg for years now, and I've always thought like, this collection, these watches, this is, you have to ask yourself like, who does this appeal to? This is very much the deep cut watch nerd
yeah.
folks. But then after the episode came together and I watched, I was thinking, well, you know what? That's not totally true, because a lot of the watches we're talking about, yeah, they might not be well known, but the price point is good, right? There are a lot of sub $1,000 watches in there. Like if you're visually attracted to them, that might be all it takes initially to get someone into it. So it ended up working for both the deep cut folks and then also people who are maybe new to the hobby. But how do I get across the line? Lucky timing. That's the answer.
Yeah, nice, and it's a beautiful video, and he has a really great collection. And I think one of the sort of the hooks on the article was like, or the social media sort of posts is, I bet you haven't seen all these, you don't know these watches.
Mm.
What surprised you in his collection? When I guess it's, if you've known him for a while, it's a bit hard to tell, but when he unrolled, that reel of a dozen or so watches, were you immediately drawn to?
Uh, I loved here's the thing, like, pardon my pronunciation, and it's irresponsible that I haven't practiced the pronunciation, but the Favre Labua.
I feel your pain on that one.
um, the Sea Sky GMT, like, immediately my eye went right to that, and I had never seen one in the metal before. Even that specific one I hadn't seen. So, you know the one I'm
Yeah,
talking
yeah,
about?
yeah.
It's a square cased watch. Yeah, so that watch immediately picked that right up. I was like, ah, man, what a cool piece. And then, but that's kind of semi expected. If the watches were in front of me, that, yeah, I'll go for that one. But the one that I kind of was surprised by liking so much was the UG Cloisonné Saudi dial. I thought that was just such a cool watch because, again, I like those watches where there's a breadcrumb of a story. So, uh, all right, Saudi Arabia's on the dial and some text is on the bottom. Find someone who can translate the text and go from there. But I didn't have to because Greg did it, right? But I thought that was a very cool watch.
Yeah, that's awesome. The UG was very cool. I have a question, because you do, you put yourself out there. It's, you're delving in the world of space and history and watches, all that can kind of be pretty ruthless if you mess it up. Do you get like
Mm.
posting anxiety when it comes to your sort of articles or videos going out?
Uh, I would say, put it this way, like, when it comes to watches, we're not saving lives, right?
Sure.
This isn't, I'm not a diplomat representing my country putting out a story, something like that. However, I am representing my organization. So, more than personal shame, I think I wouldn't want to bring any trouble to my editors or team or anything like that. So, I think that's the first thing that goes through my head. Second, well, a second opinion on the matter is adding something to the conversation, as long as it's not a bunch of hogwash and just something totally bogus. Adding something or moving the needle a little bit is good regardless. Like, yeah, I guess when people sell watches, they have bogus stories. Let's put that aside, right?
Mhm.
But just in general, watch scholarship. If you miss a detail here and there, it's not the end of the world. Or I mean, put it this way, like, if you don't try, then X, Y, and Z would never get told or out there, or you would never even give someone else the opportunity to refine the story or pick up where you left off. Anyway, so do I get posting anxiety? I don't want to make Hodinkee or myself look bad, sure, but at the same time, let's get something out there. Period. Let's talk.
Yep, 100%. And one thing that I sort of really appreciate in your sort of your work and your personal Instagram is that you seem to advocate for a lot of not the obvious choices watch wise. Like, I see a lot of maybe lesser known brands and a lot of real sort of left of center tool watch
Mm.
vibes. What draws you to that sort of style and genre and price point?
Again, so I think part of it is, remember we've talked about like when you got into watches or how you got into watches. So that discovery phase, I think much like a child is a sponge when they're
Mm.
younger because that they're early on in the journey. When I was younger, I just wasn't the mainstream brands probably couldn't afford them back then. But even beyond that, I learned a ton about these lesser brands. The lesser brands weren't lesser brands back then simply because there was almost equal access to everything. Things like Instagram and so forth didn't push you to a certain watch. It was very pure. What aesthetically draws you, and in terms of the story, what draws you, and you go learn a ton, as much as you can about that. So the core knowledge that I kind of cultivated. And I'm not saying I'm, Mr. Expert over here, but back in the day, that was the base that I operated in. And I stuck with it. I mean, that you like what you like, right? So the answer is as simple as that. It's not really advocating. It's more,
Just what it
all
is.
right, if this is my job and I got to talk about this stuff, let's write about something I like.
And so if you like what you like, what do you like in that space right now in 2021?
Modern watch or vintage too.
Yeah, modern. Like who at that sort of more affordable, practical price point is doing great stuff today?
So a few things. I like the rise because we talked about Kurano Tokyo earlier. I kind of like the rise of indies. I think that's really really interesting. Tool watches too. I mean, Ming is a weird example in terms of the divers they're putting out, but this is an interesting space to start working in. Like we're seeing Messina Labs doing some things, but more so, I'll tell you one. A watch that I bought personally is the Synchron Military.
Yep.
Oh yeah, cool.
That is a cool watch. Yeah, super super cool. Excellent idea. Another thing too, back in the day, before I could buy a Ploprof, I had an Ocean 7 Ploprof. You
Yeah,
remember
yeah,
that
yeah,
one?
yeah.
The titanium one, all this stuff.
Yep.
And so what was interesting to me is like, and I got a ton of joy out of the watch. I really did. And when the Synchron came out, I was kind of like getting similar vibes to the past. Like the first thing I thought was, oh, this is kind of like what happened back then. But then you wear the watch more and more, and you just say, well, this is pretty cool on its own. So that project super interesting to me, and I really enjoy wearing that watch now. Super well done. And if things like that continue happening, I would love to see it. Love to see more folks that normally aren't in part of a huge group or anything resurrecting past designs. And really, I would love to see more innovation, right, on the side of just coming up with something new. Hard to say exactly like watches right now, but I'm really getting into the indies and sort of like stuff further away from the bigger groups. Yeah.
Yeah, it's. I mean, your feed will obviously we'll link it up. It's an interesting one to follow, and you sort of mentioned the indies, and I'm curious to ask you about a watch that is far from indie, and it's
Mhm.
quite a hot piece that you own because I want to hear the story behind it, knowing how much and how important sort of stories are to you. You've got a Rolex Pepsi GMT Master 2. What's the story
Yeah.
there?
All right. The story. So this is again, everything keeps going back to these formative years, right? I guess watches were like something you go home from school and look at on the computer, which is kind of what I did when I got into them. I remember the Pepsi from magazine ads and so forth. So that seed was planted. So all right, we'll pull back. You guys are familiar with like the Rolex curve, yeah?
Yeah.
So I think I finally like the answer to the question is what's the story? The answer to the story is this is the end of the curve for me. Because for a long time I was like, nah, I'm not gonna buy a Rolex, no way. But so started off thinking they're awesome. Chuck Yeager advertisements, like,
Hmm.
oh my god, this is amazing. Then thinking, I mean, Rolex is not for me. Then finally, made it a mission to say, all right, like let's do it. I know you have a number of them too, but came around to thinking, all right, like yeah, they are great. And I guess the elephant in the room, so to speak, is okay. Well, how did you get one? Well, I put my name on a damn list and prayed, right, and got the phone call. The other thing about these is they are out there, right? They're actually out there. I mean, the U.S. is a huge market, so allocation is greater than some small country,
Like
but
Australia.
yeah, maybe, yeah. Um, and then finally bought it, and it was kind of a goal in terms of yes, a personal goal. Like people say you celebrate an occasion with a Rolex. It was more finally this is the end of like I have to do this, right? Like this is something that's a long time coming. I'm going to do it, and I love the watch now. It's easily the watch I wear the most.
The thing I love about it in particular, well, yours in particular, is that it seems that you wear it fishing a lot, which I just love that. Like I'm so used to seeing, Pepsis and Batgirls and all these watches, in immaculate conditions and really sort of dressed up, but you just holding it next to a fish. So Is that what you've been doing during the pandemic? Just a lot of fishing and driving?
Yeah, I think you pretty much nailed it, actually.
Sounds pretty great. Tell us
As
what that looked like.
I can tell you what it felt like. It was awesome. But basically, when we got put on work from home orders, as you guys know, I mean, writing is such a personal thing, and it's such a yes. If you're paid to do it, you're professional, and you better do your damn job, of course. But where you do it and how you do it is up to you, or at least it should be. So as soon as we got put on work from home orders, I thought, well, this isn't going to happen again, so you might as well take advantage of this time, right? So I loaded up my truck and I drove down the East Coast through various mountain ranges and spent a while actually in the Ozarks. But I've always loved fishing, and now you have a little bit more time. Like, put it this way: so think about, like, for me, let's say it's an hour each way to the office, so that's 20 hours a week.
Sure.
You're saving. Well, no, and it's more. It's for me, it's a little bit more than an hour. So look at that over a year or whatever, and think about all that time. So instead of sitting on a subway, sitting in traffic or whatever, all right, well, let's wet a line instead. And it was a great time because the pandemic allowed for a lot of self introspection, and I'm sure Australia was the same way. You can't do things indoors. You're pretty much relegated to outdoor activities only, right? So, and I know you guys actually, you can't even go outside. And at some point you couldn't, right?
Apparently.
So we at least could access national parks or things like that. And fishing is something you do in solitude, and it's something like watches you can get into deeper and deeper. So the more you do it, the more you get into it, the deeper you go. And yeah, that's kind of how that happened. Oh, and then recently in Thailand, I caught a sailfish.
Oh, wow.
Very cool.
Yeah, so that was kind of the crescendo. Like, this is the mega fish to catch. So that was nice.
Well, all right, I have a challenge for you, Cole. So you plan a trip. You can drive anywhere. You got to tell me where you're going, what you're driving, what's on your wrist, and what beer you're drinking.
Ooh, okay. This is challenging, but I'll put an Australian twist on it then.
Okay.
Just cause. So there is this brewery in your city that I went to, and I'm trying to think of the name of it. Is there like a Moondog brewery?
Yeah, Moondog.
Moondog, yeah. And a beer that I had there was just awesome. And I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was something. Oh my God. It was like beet or something. Like, it sounds like but it turned out to be awesome. So here's what I'll do: I will commission a custom Moondog
Nice.
IPA. We'll start off with that using some hops from America that I'll bring over, and then give it to the brewers there and say, hey, let's do a little American Aussie collaboration and come up with an IPA. I'll bring some. I'll send the rest to you guys if we're not together already. Then the watch for this trip.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I would do, actually, if we're going Australian? I won't go sports car. I will go, probably, I have a Pajero, which is popular over there, not in the States. However, something over there I think would be interesting is a Nissan Patrol.
Sure.
So I'll do a worked up Nissan Patrol with, and I'll drive it into, what would be interesting? Driving from Melbourne up to Darwin through the middle of the country, through like the place you don't want to be if something goes wrong.
Yeah, sure.
And
Is
the watch? Yeah.
I was just going to ask Andy, is the Patrol the Pathfinder here?
No, we have a Nissan Patrol.
We've got a Patrol as well? Okay, sure.
The watch, interesting one, because you're going to want something that, if you perish in the middle of the outback, will be kind of on you forever in perpetuity, right? So it has to, that's what I'm thinking. It's not like, oh, I'm going to bring a Breitling emergency because I can do the homing beacon or anything. It's more, if I'm doing this and it doesn't go according to plan, then this watch will be the last thing I have with me, right?
Uh-huh.
And maybe the dingoes will finish me off, and the watch will be the only thing left. So it's probably my GMT master in that case.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah. little bit of creative
like it.
approach
I'm
to
up
it.
for
But
the
yeah,
Moondog,
that's
and
what
I'm
I do.
sure they would be up for any collaborations with, anyone really. They're a pretty open bunch of brewers, I think.
Yeah, I thought that beer stuck out to me. That brewery stuck out to me when I was over there. And I kind of did a little tour of Mountain Goat Brewing. Is that
Nice.
what it was
Yep.
called? Mountain Goat, Full Moon, or Moondog, and then a bunch of other little ones here and there. And then one brewery in Bendigo, a mining town. Is that
Bendigo's my
with a
hometown,
theater?
Cold.
Is it
Yeah.
really?
I spent my
I
formative
did,
years there.
I did not know that. Well, I will say you have a quite beautiful and interesting hometown,
Yeah.
and it's no surprise how
Yeah, you wouldn't want to grow up there though. Pretty to look at, but it's good to get out when you're a teenager.
Apologies to all
yeah,
of our
fair. That's how
Bendigo
we all feel.
listeners, Felix.
No, our Bendigo listeners will understand. We've just had an outstanding and surprise recommendation of Australian beers via one of America's foremost watch journalists, which is an odd twist of events. Is there anything else you would recommend, Cole? Not watch related, maybe not even beer related,
Mhm.
to someone listening to this podcast? Is there anything that you would say, read, watch, listen, eat, that you've experienced
Mm.
recently?
Okay. That's an interesting one. I think if we're staying on these themes or whatever, a few things. And there will be a piece coming out about this soon. This isn't watch related, but it's watch adjacent.
Mhm.
One of my favorite pastimes is combing through government databases, not necessarily American, any of them, and just looking at pictures from times gone by. And some of them have watches, some of them don't. Like you do it to see what's on the wrist, but I've discovered so many fascinating things that way. So I would say, like for us, the National Oceanographic, an organization called NOAA or NASA. I mean, NASA's the one that everyone knows, but pick your favorite government database and just look through it and see where that goes, because it'll be a great starting point for something. I think that's good to do if you have some free time. For watching things, Donut Media, I love. They cover cars. Do you know those
Mhm.
guys or no? Do you know what it is? Yeah. So I've been watching a ton of Donut. Love them. Reading Blue Meridian or anything Peter Matheson. Uh, Eating you mentioned.
I mean, you don't have to
Mm.
go with all of them, but I
We're
like
loving
the
it though.
I like the commitment.
Yeah, I mean the eating one that's a hard one, but I think so. I did see something recently that they're making a feature film or documentary or something about Bourdain. So I'm looking forward to that. I will say
Very cool.
food adjacent.
Very
Yeah.
cool. Oh, well, some solid recommendations on all front. And of course, if you're in your side of the world, World War II Day, although you've probably missed it. So World War II Day 2022.
Yeah, 2022.
2022. Maybe we'll be there. Cole, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a treat. And yeah, we're definitely gonna have to get you back on for the next big article you drop.
I mean, the pleasure is mine. Seriously, I love everything you guys do. Love following you, and also the coolest thing to me is that although the watch world is relatively homogenous, like I just learned about some sort of degradation of an Australian Facebook watch flipping thing or something. It has an acronym that I saw, and people were like, "Oh, this has gone to shit" or something like that. Do you know what I'm talking about or no? KWACC or something.
Oh
No.
no! How do
Oh
you?
man,
AWS? Yes. Well, I don't know.
maybe this
Was this about
somewhere
like
I
a
was.
guy that got busted for selling fake watches a while ago?
No,
No,
not
not
that. I know
idea.
that one. I know that tale inside now. This was this was yeah, okay. A guy put on his Instagram, what do you not like about this world? It was tell me a secret, what do you not like about
Oh,
this world? And
yes, yes,
someone
Oh,
went
that
off
was
yes.
JP
saying like,
Melbs.
yeah. And someone went on something saying like the 8 KWACC is, gone bad or something like that. But that led me to look at it and research a little bit more. So what I was gonna say is the coolest thing to me is that yes, everyone's reading the same 5 sites and this and that. However, it's so cool still that there's strong local flair in this world. And what I like is that I can see the world down under through you guys and listen to it and so forth, and then learn about what's going on in the watch world and beyond. So that's very cool. to me. So thank you.
Well, you're welcome.
Vice versa.
It's been really great chatting to you, and go enjoy some warbirds.
Thank you, sir. And I will give you guys the report on how it went.
Lovely. Cole Pennington, everybody. What a guy. What a great guy.
He's, in the introduction, I hesitated about calling him a legend. I beat around the bush a little bit, but I think the status is earned.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, Felix, if people want to email us, otthepodcast@gmail.com, or hit us on Instagram, it's ot.podcast. Don't forget about our Discord channel either.
There's a link to that in the show notes. It's the easiest way to get there, because otherwise it's not a snappy handle.
Thank you, NOMOS, for sponsoring today's episode and allowing us to put this all together. And yeah, if you like OT, subscribe, tell your friends, tell your barber, tell the person with fragrance, tell your Japanese denim guy.
Yeah,
or gal. Scream it from the rooftops and give us 5-star reviews wherever you go.
Yeah, well, except 4.5, to be honest, but 5's ideal.
Let's do it. All right, we'll see you next time.